At first, no one thought much of it. Dogs freeze in cold weather. But when Max stopped on the hill and locked his gaze on the empty playground, and didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't even blink, they knew something was wrong. Then someone whispered, "What's he looking at?" And when they followed his stare, everything changed. It was the coldest day of the year when Max stopped moving. The Petersons had taken their usual walk through town, bundled up in coats and scarves, their breaths misting in the biting air. It was the kind of winter afternoon that muted the world, everything soft and hushed beneath a thick blanket of snow. The town of Windermere was quiet that time of year. Nestled between two frozen lakes and wrapped in woods that creaked beneath the weight of icicles, it almost felt forgotten by time. Christmas lights still clung to windows, but most homes were shuttered and dark. Only the sound of crunching snow beneath boots kept them company as they walked down the main path that led through the woods to the old municipal playground. Max was leading the way, nose low, tail swinging lightly. Until he wasn't. As they crested the ridge just above the old playground, Max stopped. Completely. His body locked into place. His ears perked forward, and his head tilted ever so slightly. "Max?" Jenna Peterson called softly, tugging gently at his leash. But the golden retriever didn't respond. He didn't growl. Didn't whine. Didn't bark. He just stared. "What is it, boy?" Jenna's husband David asked, stepping beside her. "Did you see a deer or something?" Max didn't twitch. He was staring at the playground below them, a place that hadn't seen children in weeks. The swings were frozen in place. The jungle gym glistened with frost. The slide had a thick coating of snow built up around its base. No footprints. No signs of life. Just winter's hush. And yet Max was locked in, like a statue. "Maybe he senses something," David said. "Animals do that. Maybe a fox came through." But it wasn't a fox. Jenna's sister, Rachel, trailed behind, her daughter Mia skipping slowly across the hilltop. Mia was 6, bright-eyed, and oblivious to the tension building. When she saw Max, she stopped. "Why is Max staring like that?" "We don't know, sweetie," Jenna replied. "Maybe he just heard something." Then Mia said something that made everyone shiver. "He's staring at her." The adults turned. "At who, honey?" Rachel asked. Mia pointed to the playground. "At the girl by the slide." Jenna's stomach flipped. "Mia, there's no one down there." Mia frowned. "Yes, there is. She's standing in the snow." David looked through his binoculars. "Nothing. Just snow and shadow." "Come on," he said. "Let's go check it out." They descended the hill slowly, snow crunching louder now, as if the quiet itself were amplifying every step. Max didn't move until they reached the base of the hill, then, finally, he followed. But not like a dog returning to normal. His body stayed tense. His gaze never wavered. When they reached the edge of the playground, everything seemed ordinary, at first. Then Rachel spotted it. "Wait," she whispered, pointing to the slide. "Look at the snow." At the base of the slide, the snow was disturbed. Not melted, just molded. Like someone had been lying there. But there were no footprints. No approach path. No exit. Just a shallow impression in the snow, shaped vaguely like a curled-up body. David crouched beside it, brushing snow aside carefully. The snow was packed down in a smooth oval. Delicate. Precise. Jenna knelt beside him. "Could have been a fox bedding down." "Or a deer," Rachel offered. But David shook his head. "Too small. Too clean." Then Mia said, she was sad. They all turned. "What do you mean?" Rachel asked. Mia stepped beside Max, petting his back gently. She was just standing there, looking at us. But she looked sad. Like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Mia, Jenna said slowly, kneeling, are you pretending? Or did you really see someone? Mia hesitated. I think. Max saw her too. They all looked at the dog. Max stood stiffly beside the slide, eyes scanning the treeline. I don't like this, Rachel said, pulling Mia close. It's too cold to stay out here. David agreed. Let's mark the spot. We'll come back later. Maybe there's a sinkhole or something under the snow. Could be dangerous. He pulled a broken stick from beneath a bench and stuck it upright near the slide. But as he did, Jenna noticed something else, scratched faintly into the icy side of the slide. Words. 4 of them. I was never gone. She staggered back, breath catching. David, look at this. He stared. It's probably just graffiti. In the middle of winter? Rachel asked. Who comes out here in a snowstorm to scratch that? A gust of wind whipped through the trees. Max barked once, sharp, urgent. And all of them turned toward the woods. For a split second, just past the edge of the frozen fence, they saw it. A flash of white. A silhouette. A child? Then it vanished. David ran toward the edge, flashlight out. Nothing. Just snow. Rachel grabbed Mia. We're leaving. Now. They backed away, but Jenna lingered, staring at the writing on the slide. The letters hadn't been made with a key or a knife. They were uneven, jagged. Like someone had scratched them, with nails. Back at the house, no one spoke for a while. Max lay by the fire but didn't sleep. His eyes remained open, ears twitching at every creak and gust of wind. Rachel tucked me into bed, then whispered to Jenna in the hallway. She's never lied about things like that before. Jenna nodded. And Max? I've never seen him like that. David came downstairs with his laptop. I looked it up, he said. 10 years ago, a girl named Evelyn Holt went missing. Where? Rachel asked. David's eyes darkened. Right there. That same playground. Open. The Petersons didn't sleep well that night. Even the warmth of their fireplace couldn't melt the strange chill that had seeped into the house with them from the playground. Max lay curled near the back door, occasionally lifting his head to stare at the woods behind the property. And Mia, usually a sound sleeper, kept waking with whispers of she's still there. At 2:14 a.m., Jenna gave up and joined David in the kitchen, where he sat in sweatpants and a flannel, scrolling slowly through old news archives. Did you find anything else? She asked. He turned the laptop toward her. Evelyn Holt. Age 7. Disappeared 10 years ago, almost to the day. December 27th. From the playground? Jenna whispered. David nodded. Windermere's police report said she was last seen at the playground with her aunt. They were sledding, and Evelyn ran toward the jungle gym alone. The aunt turned her back for a second, and when she looked again, Evelyn was gone. Jenna felt her stomach tighten. No witnesses. No sounds. No footprints. Just gone. He pulled up another article, faded and yellowed. The headline read, Town searches woods for missing girl, no leads in Holt disappearance. Below was a photo of Evelyn. Jenna stared at it for a long moment. Blonde hair. Green eyes. A round face framed by a red scarf. She looks like Mia, she murmured. David looked up. That's what I thought too. The next morning, Jenna called the Windermere Library. Do you have old police archives? She asked the clerk. We do, the woman replied, but only summaries. Most case files are held by the town hall. Jenna made an appointment. When she arrived, the clerk, a woman in her 60s, gave her a slow, quiet look when she asked for the Holt case. You're the second person to ask about Evelyn this week, the clerk said. Jenna's heart skipped. Who else? A man. Maybe in his 40s. Said he was doing a cold case podcast. But he never left a name. The clerk brought out a binder with clipped articles and microfilm stills. I was here when Evelyn went missing, she said. People searched the woods for weeks. Volunteers from 3 towns came in. Dogs, helicopters, nothing. Jenna flipped through the binder. Witness statements. The aunt's testimony. Search maps. Local rumors. One stood out. A note scribbled in the margin of a newspaper clipping. No footprints in or out of the slide area. How did she vanish without leaving a trail? Jenna swallowed. Has there ever been another case like it? The clerk hesitated. 2 years later, a boy went missing on the other side of the woods. Near the sled hill. Never found. No proof it was related, but the families always wondered. Meanwhile, back at the house, Mia sat at the kitchen table with Max lying beneath her feet. She was drawing. What you making? Rachel asked. It's her, Mia said. The girl from the playground. Rachel leaned over. The drawing was crude, but unmistakable, a small girl in a dress, standing at the bottom of a slide, her eyes large, her mouth a line. Around her were long, curving lines, almost like tree branches, or something else. What are those lines? Rachel asked. Mia tapped her pencil. They're the things that hide her. Rachel tried not to show her reaction. And how do you know she was there? Mia shrugged. She didn't say it. She just felt it. Max knew too. Rachel knelt beside the dog. What did you see, Max? What did you smell? The dog lifted his head, ears perked. His eyes pointed toward the back window. Toward the woods. That afternoon, Jenna returned from the town hall with photocopies of Evelyn's missing persons file. She gathered everyone in the living room. This wasn't just a random disappearance, she said. David read aloud from the file. Last sighting, 4:46 p.m. weather, snow flurries. Playground partially frozen. Evelyn was wearing a green coat, red scarf, and brown boots. No signs of struggle. No prints. Dog teams lost scent after 20 yards. He flipped to another page. No physical evidence recovered. Only item found, a drawing taped beneath the slide 2 days later. Image depicts a child surrounded by curved, abstract shapes. He looked up slowly. Like Mia's drawing. Jenna nodded. The handwriting matched Evelyn's school assignments. Max began pacing around the room again that evening. At 6:03 p.m., he walked to the front door and sat, staring at it. Not whining. Just waiting. When no one moved, he barked once, low, commanding. I think he wants us to go back, David said. To the playground? Rachel asked, incredulous. Max barked again. Mia stood and put on her coat. I think we should. The sun had dipped below the horizon when they reached the playground again. The trees whispered softly with the wind. And Max ran straight to the slide. At its base, the snow had shifted again. Another indent. Smaller this time. As if someone had been kneeling. David shone his flashlight around. There's something in the snow. He knelt, brushing it aside, until he revealed something flat and red. A scarf. Old. Faded. Stiff with frost. Jenna pulled up the missing persons report and held the photo beside the scarf. It was a perfect match. Oh my God, she whispered. It's hers. Then Max barked again, but not at them. At the woods. Everyone turned. In the trees, behind the seesaw, stood a shape. Small. Still. A girl. She didn't move. Didn't speak. Just watched. David raised his light. But the beam passed through nothing. She was gone. They stood in silence for a long moment. Mia clutched Max tightly. "She's not trying to scare us," she whispered. "She wants help." Rachel's voice cracked. "Help with what?" Mia's answer was quiet. "She doesn't know where she went." The silence after they saw her was thick and aching. No one spoke as they walked home from the playground, Max trotting tensely ahead. Mia held his leash tightly, her small mittened hand lost in his thick golden fur. Behind her, Jenna, David, and Rachel said nothing, each one trying to rationalize what they had seen. A trick of the light. A shadow. A collective hallucination. But no explanation could erase what they felt. That they had seen her. That she had looked back. Once home, Jenna laid the red scarf on the kitchen table. It was crusted stiff from the cold, and the ends were frayed. Carefully, she placed a photo of Evelyn beside it, one of the few retrieved from the town archives. Rachel leaned over. "It's identical. The pattern, the stitching. This is hers." David nodded. "But how is that possible? 10 years, it should have disintegrated." No one answered. Mia sat at the table drawing again. This time, she wasn't using crayons or pencils. She'd found a pen in the drawer, something about the permanence seemed important to her. After several minutes, she slid the paper toward Jenna. "I think this was what she was trying to show me." Jenna stared at the page. It showed the slide again, but this time, the girl was inside the slide, peeking out from its plastic tunnel. Her eyes were wide, and her hands were pressed against the curved walls. Around her were black scribbles, dozens of them, like claws or cracks or reaching arms. At the bottom of the page was a line. Just one. It wasn't the snow that took her. Rachel shuddered. "She drew that on her own?" Mia nodded. "I didn't make it up. I just saw it." The next morning, Jenna and David returned to the playground. Max led the way again, pulling at his leash. They brought a spade, careful not to draw attention. The town was still quiet for winter break, most families having traveled south or holed up indoors. At the base of the slide, David began digging. Just beneath the frozen surface, he hit something flat. It wasn't a rock. It was wood. He brushed it off, revealing a wooden board, painted faintly on one side. He pulled harder. It came up with a creak. Beneath it was a small compartment, maybe an old part of the slide's foundation or a forgotten storm drain. Inside was a sealed plastic folder, slightly warped but dry. They opened it right there on the snow. Inside, drawings. Pages and pages of them. Most were in the shaky, looping handwriting of a child. Some were stick figures. Others, more disturbing, black shapes that looked like spider limbs crawling out of corners. Tall silhouettes with long fingers. Circles with dozens of eyes. But what made Jenna's blood run cold was the final drawing. It showed Evelyn herself, drawn in blue crayon, standing in the center of the playground with lines surrounding her, like she was inside something invisible. Above her, written in block letters. "I'm still here." They brought the folder back home, careful not to bend any of the pages. Jenna contacted the local sheriff's office, requesting to speak with someone involved in the original Holt case. An hour later, she got a call from retired Deputy Clay Norris. "I remember the case," he said over the speakerphone. "I've never stopped remembering it." Jenna explained what they had found. There was a long silence. "I believe you," Norris said finally. "There were things back then, things we weren't allowed to say. Missing evidence. Reports that got lost. The chief didn't want the town spooked." "Like what?" David asked. "There were reports from kids," Norris continued. "Back in '08. They said they saw a girl beneath the playground, like under the slide, inside the ground. But she'd disappear when you looked again. And Max, that same dog, he was part of the search. Jenna blinked. Wait, what? He was a rescue pup back then, Norris said. You're Max. Same golden coat, same eyes. He was part of a volunteer dog team. I remember him because he stopped at the slide and refused to move. Just sat there, watching the woods. Wouldn't bark. David stood up, eyes wide. That was 10 years ago. Dogs remember, Norris said quietly. Even when people don't. Back at home, Mia had placed all the drawings in a new folder, carefully sorted by theme, happy ones, sad ones, scary ones. She pointed to a series of 3 pages she called the story. The first page showed Evelyn playing at the slide. The second, her hand reaching out of the tunnel. The third, her face, partly covered by shadowy shapes, eyes wide, mouth open. Beneath it, Evelyn had written, "They can't follow me if I'm quiet." That night, Mia refused to sleep in her room. Why? Rachel asked gently. She's closer now, Mia whispered. She's almost out. Out of what? Mia pointed toward the hill. Out of the snow. At 3:26 a.m., Max began growling softly. Not loud. Not frantic. Just a warning. Jenna came downstairs. Max was at the door, tail still, staring out the window. She looked too, and there, standing at the edge of the woods, was the same silhouette. The girl. Only this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, deeper in the trees, something shifted. A taller shape. No features. No face. But unmistakably watching. Jenna felt cold drain into her bones. She whispered, "What do you want?" And a voice, not in her ears, but in her chest, replied. She was never gone. She was taken. Max growled again. But still didn't move. Still didn't bark. He was waiting. Snow fell in lazy spirals as morning crept back into Windmere, casting a soft, pale light across the rooftops. But inside the Peterson home, no one was sleeping. Jenna stood by the kitchen window, watching the hill in the distance where the playground lay hidden under white. Her hand gripped the cup of untouched coffee, but her mind was locked on the thing she saw last night. Evelyn. And behind her, that thing. Tall. Wrong. Like a shadow that didn't belong to anything that should have lived. David came down the stairs, rubbing his face. She's out there, Jenna said without looking. I know, he replied, voice heavy. And she's not alone. They sat in silence for a few minutes until Rachel joined them, carrying Mia in her arms. The little girl had fallen asleep only an hour earlier, curled up on the floor next to Max, who hadn't left the front door since 3 a.m. Mia stirred, her eyes fluttering open. He's still waiting, she murmured. Who is? Rachel asked. Mia pointed toward the window. The tall one. He's not finished. They returned to the playground at noon. Snow continued falling, soft and steady. Everything was still. They brought shovels. Not because they wanted to disturb anything, but because they had to know. Max led them, as always, straight to the slide. David and Rachel worked quietly at first, clearing snow from the base, then the sides. Jenna used a brush to sweep off the top, revealing faint scrapes in the plastic, claw-like marks, small and thin, like fingernails. After 30 minutes, David's shovel hit something hard beneath the back slope of the playground. A hollow sound. He dropped to his knees and began scraping away with gloved hands until a rectangular metal panel emerged. Rusted. Bolted to the earth with twisted screws. Rachel squinted. That's not part of the slide. No, David said. This is something else. Jenna pulled out her phone and snapped a photo. David tried the edges with a crowbar. It took several minutes, But finally, the panel gave way, groaning as the rusted frame bent inward. Beneath it was a hole. A small shaft, no more than 3 feet wide. Inside was darkness, solid, pressing black that swallowed the light from their flashlights almost completely. A stale, cold draft wafted up from it, carrying something else. A smell. Old. Like mildew and dust, and something faintly sweet and sour. "Is this an old maintenance hatch?" Rachel asked. "No records of one," David said. "I've seen the park's blueprints. Nothing like this is supposed to be here." "Then who put it here?" Jenna whispered. Max refused to go near the hole. He growled low and deep, backing away with his tail between his legs. That alone made Jenna freeze. Max had tracked wounded animals, fought off coyotes. He wasn't afraid of the dark. But he was afraid of this. Mia stepped forward. "Can I see?" "No," Jenna said firmly. "You stay here with Max." "I don't think she's in there anymore," Mia said softly. "But she left something." David lowered a small camera with a light into the shaft. The feed showed narrow metal rungs descending about 8 feet before opening into a wider space. Concrete walls. Exposed rebar. And drawings. Thousands of them. Covering every surface. Some were old and fading, others looked freshly drawn. Stick figures with wide eyes. Shadows looming behind them. Circles with teeth. And names. So many names scrawled over and over again. Evelyn. 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 And beneath those, others. Names that didn't match any records of local children. The last frame before the camera feed cut? A drawing of Max. Perfectly rendered in crayon. And standing beside him, Mia. They pulled the camera back up. Rachel looked pale. She's seen this place in her mind. Jenna turned to Mia. "How do you know about this?" "I don't know," Mia said. "But I remember being there. Even though I wasn't." David exhaled. It's like Evelyn left the memory behind, and Mia caught it. Jenna turned to the hatch. "We have to report this." David nodded. "I'll call the sheriff. But we can't let this place stay open." Rachel picked up the metal panel. "We seal it. For now." They bolted the cover shut and stacked snow and ice on top, then covered it with branches. Before they left, Mia pulled something from her pocket, a drawing. It was of Evelyn, smiling this time, standing at the edge of the playground, her arms raised to the sky. Mia tucked it into the snow where the girl had stood the night before. "She needs to know we saw her," she said. "And that we remember." The sheriff's office responded quickly. Deputy Harlan visited the site and reviewed the camera footage. He didn't question what he saw, just shook his head slowly. "This was buried for a reason," he said. Later that day, he returned with someone Jenna didn't expect. Deputy Clay Norris, the same man who'd spoken to her on the phone. Now gray-haired, leaning on a cane, his eyes went wide when he saw the hatch site. "I remember when they paved this playground," he muttered. "That hole was already here. They built over it. Said it was just an old storm drain. But no one could explain who built it." He knelt beside the sealed cover. "I think someone buried something darker than rainwater here." That evening, Mia had a dream. In it, Evelyn stood at the slide again. But this time, she smiled. Her hair blew gently in the wind. And beside her stood Max. But it wasn't the real Max. It was the memory she had drawn. A version caught in a place where echoes live. Evelyn spoke. "Thank you for remembering me." Then she faded into the snow. And something else, something tall and featureless, turned its head toward Mia. But she wasn't afraid. She simply said, "You can't hide anymore. And then she woke up. Max was already sitting at the foot of her bed, staring out the window toward the playground, waiting. The next morning, a light frost had glazed over the hatch, camouflaging it almost entirely under the snow. Max remained at the back door of the Peterson house, still staring toward the woods. He hadn't barked once, not even when the mail truck pulled up. His silence had become an unspoken drumbeat of tension in the house. Inside, the drawings from the hidden chamber lay spread across the living room floor. Jenna had carefully flattened each one, weighing the corners with coffee mugs and books. David had begun cross-referencing the names with Winmere's public records and missing persons reports. Rachel watched over Mia, who sat with a blank sheet of paper in front of her, eyes distant. "She's not drawing today," Rachel whispered. "She says the air feels too loud." David spoke up from the kitchen. Out of 62 unique names on the drawings, only 8 matched known missing children in Winmere. Jenna blinked. "What about the others?" He turned the laptop toward her. A spreadsheet glowed on the screen. 32 don't appear anywhere in local records. Not here. Not neighboring counties. No birth certificates. No school records. Nothing. Made up? Rachel asked. David shook his head. "I don't think so. There's consistency, repetition in handwriting. They weren't random. Some of them show up multiple times on different pages, drawn by what looks like different hands." Jenna said it before she could stop herself. "Like different children adding names." Rachel went cold. "You think more than one child's been down there?" David nodded grimly. "Not just Evelyn. Maybe not even just from Winmere." Mia finally spoke. "Some of them got taken too fast to leave names." Everyone turned toward her. "I don't know how I know. I just feel it," she said. "Like when I sleep, I can hear the wall breathing." Rachel crouched next to her. "Honey, what do you mean?" Mia hesitated, then looked up. "They write names because it keeps the tall one away. If they stop writing, it remembers them." She pointed to one of the drawings, tall black lines curling across the paper like grasping branches. "That's how he finds the ones who forget themselves." Deputy Harlan returned that afternoon with 2 additional officers and an evidence tech from the state. They reopened the hatch carefully and lowered a better camera, this time equipped with a heat sensor and directional mic. The shaft had widened, just slightly. Concrete fragments lay in new positions, as if something had shifted. The room at the bottom looked unchanged at first. But as the camera panned the walls, something caught Jenna's breath. More names. New ones. In fresh crayon. Bright green, still flaking. The newest name was scrawled near the baseboard. "MIA." Jenna stepped back, dizzy. Rachel scooped up her daughter and held her tight. "She hasn't been down there," Jenna whispered. "She hasn't." But Mia was calm. "He's trying to remember me now." Deputy Harlan sealed the hatch again, this time bolting it shut and ordering a perimeter fence to be built within 48 hours. The area was declared restricted, and state authorities were called. But that night, the drawings changed again. At 3:17 a.m., Max woke with a snarl. He stood over Mia's bed, ears raised, eyes locked on the closet door. Jenna rushed in. The closet door stood slightly ajar. Inside, darkness. Nothing moved. No sound. But one of Mia's drawings had been torn from her desk and stuffed behind a shoe box. It was the one of Evelyn smiling. And it had been altered. Now Evelyn's face was scratched out, her eyes blacked into deep, hollow pits. Rachel stared at it, horrified. "Mia, did you do this?" Mia shook her head. "He's mad I'm remembering." The next day, Evelyn's mother arrived. Her name was Lorraine Holt, early 50s, silver streaks in her auburn hair, shoulders weighed down by 10 years of quiet grief. She had never moved away. She still lived in Windmere, waiting for an answer. "I heard what happened," she said, stepping into the Peterson home. Jenna welcomed her in, and after tea and long silence, Lorraine finally spoke. "You think my daughter's still in there?" Jenna showed her the drawing Mia made. Then the folder from the hatch. Then the scarf. Lorraine's hands trembled as she touched the fabric. This was hers. "She's been trying to reach out," Jenna said gently. "To say something." Lorraine stared at Mia. "She saw her?" Mia nodded. "She says thank you for not stopping." Lorraine's eyes filled with tears. "I never did." That evening, they returned to the playground one last time before the state sealed it off. Lorraine walked alone to the slide, snow crunching underfoot. Max stood beside her, tail low. Lorraine knelt and whispered, "I'm sorry I wasn't fast enough." Then she placed a letter in a glass jar at the base of the slide. Inside it, a photograph, a lock of Evelyn's hair from her baby book, and a simple note. "I believe you were taken. But I also believe you're trying to find your way back." She turned to Jenna. "Maybe she's not trapped down there. Maybe she's only anchored by something darker." That night, Mia dreamed again. This time, she was inside the slide. Everything curved and cold, the plastic walls pressing in. She crawled and crawled, then emerged, not in the playground, but in the room beneath. The walls pulsed with breath. And every name she passed whispered, "Don't forget me." She reached the back wall. And there stood Evelyn, holding a crayon. She handed it to Mia and pointed to an empty space. Mia understood. She wrote, "I see you." Evelyn smiled. Behind them, something moved. But this time, Evelyn stood between it and Mia. "You can't have her," Evelyn said. And the wall cracked. Mia woke with a gasp. On her nightstand lay a drawing she had not made. It was Evelyn's handwriting. Just 3 words. "You found me." Windmere woke to the sound of construction. By morning, the town's public works crew had cordoned off the playground with caution tape and installed a temporary steel barrier around the slide. The hatch had been double welded overnight by a state recovery team. It was official now, the site was under investigation. But inside the Peterson home, things were far from settled. The drawing on Mia's nightstand, Evelyn's handwriting, had been authenticated by Lorraine Holt within seconds. "She wrote this," Lorraine whispered, fingers trembling. "That's her E. Always had that backward hook." It was impossible. Illogical. But it was real. And Max knew it too. He had moved from watching the forest to watching Mia. Never leaving her side. Sleeping beside her bed. Following her to the bathroom. When she sat on the floor, he sat facing the door. Guarding. Protecting. Meanwhile, David had begun compiling every drawing they had found into a digital archive. He mapped names, dates, symbols. Patterns began emerging. One recurring symbol stood out. A jagged spiral, sometimes in the background, sometimes etched into the edges of pages. Sometimes it was vertical, sometimes horizontal. In several instances, it formed the center of what looked like a doorway. Rachel noticed it first. "This looks like the same symbol Mia draws in her notebooks." "Look." She flipped through one of Mia's old sketchbooks from the fall. There it was, on the cover. A spiral with claw marks curling outward. "She was drawing this before we ever saw the playground again," Jenna said. Mia didn't look up. She was working on something else. "I didn't draw it because I saw it," she said. "I drew it because it was looking at me." That same morning, something unexpected happened. The state recovery team returned to inspect the site, but the hatch had changed. Where once there was a seamless metal panel, now the bolts looked warped, as if something underneath had pressed against them. Deputy Harlan tapped the surface. It rang hollow. Before, it had been solid. Something below had moved. "I don't like this," he muttered. "This isn't some old cellar. Something's still active down there." He called in a geophysical unit to scan the ground. They arrived that afternoon with radar equipment and seismic sensors. After 2 hours, the technician called Harlan over, pale and nervous. "You're not going to believe this." The scan showed the chamber beneath the slide was just the top of a much larger structure. A honeycomb of tunnels, interconnected, descending at least 40 feet beneath the playground. Chambers of irregular size. Some circular. Some too narrow for a child to crawl through. Others, massive. One chamber registered a heat signature. Not enough for a person, but just enough to be wrong. The readings made no sense. They called it an anomaly. Jenna had another word for it. A nest. That evening, Mia woke again at 3:03 a.m. Max was already at the door. He wasn't growling. He was whining. Soft. Urgent. She got out of bed and looked out the window. At the far tree line, barely visible in the dark, movement. Not a silhouette this time, but dozens of flickers. Like flashes of light. Mia touched the glass. "They're all trying to get out," she whispered. "They're cracking the walls." Downstairs, Jenna and David were watching the local news, which had picked up the story in hushed tones. Former cold case reopened as mysterious underground chamber found beneath playground. They didn't mention Evelyn's name. They didn't mention the drawings. They couldn't. How would they explain it? But the truth was already out. By morning, photos of the drawings had leaked online. People from neighboring towns started arriving at Windmere. Some brought photos of their own missing children. Others brought drawings, ones their kids had made in sleep, nearly identical to the ones found beneath the slide. One mother from 3 towns over stood sobbing in front of the caution tape. "She drew this exact shape," she said, pointing to the spiral. "Over and over for a month. And then she vanished." The town was no longer quiet. Inside the house, Mia finished her newest drawing. She handed it to Lorraine Holt, who had returned that day with flowers and a photograph of Evelyn's 6th birthday. The drawing showed the playground in full detail, but not in snow. In rain. Lightning arced through the sky. And Evelyn stood beside the slide. Arms raised. Not scared. Not running. Calling. "This is the storm," Mia said softly. "She says it's the time." Rachel frowned. "Time for what?" "To break it." Mia looked at the window again. "To let the others out." The storm began 3 hours later. A freak winter thunderstorm, rare for the region. Lightning cracked the sky. Thunder shook the rooftops. Snow melted instantly in sheets of sleet and rain. The playground turned into a muddy basin. And the slide? It cracked. Split straight down the middle, a black line tearing through the base. By morning, it had collapsed inward. Deputy Harlan was first on the scene. The hatch was gone. The steel had been pushed up from underneath and flung 5 feet into the air. Inside the hole, the shaft was open and different. Now, stairs descended instead of a ladder. Old stone steps. Moss-covered. Dripping with condensation. And lining the walls? Names. Still glowing faintly. Like they had just been written. Jenna arrived with Lorraine, Mia, and Rachel just as state officers roped off the area again. But Mia walked straight to the caution tape, knelt in the mud, and placed her final drawing. It was Evelyn. Standing at the top of the stairs, reaching out. And behind her, shadows breaking. Cracks spilling light. Rachel asked, trembling, "What's happening now?" Mia stood and said quietly, "She's not trapped anymore." That night, Lorraine found one final note on her porch. Written in childlike handwriting on the back of an old library card. "I was lost. But you looked for me anyway. You didn't forget. And that's what saved me. Signed only, E." The storm left more than puddles and broken branches behind. It revealed something that had waited 10 years to be found. The morning after, the air in Windmere was damp and strangely quiet, like the town itself was holding its breath. Rain-soaked grass led the way to the slide, or what was left of it. The cracked plastic lay twisted like broken bones, and the steel hatch, once securely bolted over the shaft, had been flung open like a toy lid. Now, stone steps descended into the earth. Deputy Harlan, backed by 2 state troopers and a structural engineer, prepared to enter. Jenna, Rachel, David, and Lorraine Holt stood behind the caution tape, holding hands. Mia sat beside Max, who had refused to leave the edge of the woods all morning. His eyes never left the broken playground. "He knows she's down there," Mia whispered. Jenna looked at the troopers. "Are you sure it's safe?" The engineer nodded hesitantly. "The structure's old but intact. Looks like stonework, probably pre-Windmere settlement. No known tunnels in this region. This shouldn't exist." At 9:17 a.m., they descended. Flashlights cut through the musty dark. Each footstep echoed like a bell in a church that had forgotten its congregation. The walls were lined with crayon drawings, still miraculously preserved. Some were bright, cheerful, smiling suns, butterflies, flowers. Others twisted into spirals, claws, and eyes. Dozens of eyes. Harlan paused at one wall, shining his light across names. Evelyn. Kara. Jaden. Sarah. Luca. And beneath them, new ones. Mia. Max. He swallowed hard. "This place remembers everyone who looks," he muttered. At the base of the stairs, the tunnel opened into a circular room. No doors. No windows. But no dirt either. Just smooth, damp stone. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, vanishing into blackness. And on every inch of the chamber walls, from floor to unseen ceiling, drawings. The colors were more vivid than they had any right to be. As if time had passed differently down here. As if the room had been waiting for someone to return. In the center of the room, undisturbed by mold or dust, sat a child's rocking horse. Wooden. Hand-carved. Its eyes were hollowed out. No dust. No spiderwebs. Just waiting. The troopers scanned the space, weapons holstered but ready. The engineer whispered, "It's like a time capsule built by ghosts." Harlan moved forward cautiously. On the floor near the horse sat a piece of cloth. He bent down, picked it up. It was a mitten. Child-sized. Stitched with tiny red flowers. Lorraine gasped when she saw it. "That's Evelyn's. I made that set for her 7th birthday." Then the air shifted. A breeze, not cold, but heavy. The rocking horse began to sway, just once. Creak. Everyone froze. The walls began to glow. Not all at once, but in waves, as if a hidden light inside the drawings was stirring. The crayon lines brightened. One by one, the names began to shimmer. A soft hum filled the air, like hundreds of whispers overlapping, not spoken aloud but vibrating in their chests. The engineer dropped his equipment. "Something's waking up." Back on the surface, Mia stood up. Max barked. Once. Loud. then sat down again. "What is it, boy?" Jenna asked. Mia's eyes welled up. "She's in the room. She's waiting." "For us?" "No," Mia said. "For the name that hasn't been written yet." Rachel crouched. "Whose name?" Mia didn't answer. Instead, she began drawing again, fast, like she was tracing something she already knew. In the underground chamber, Harlan and the troopers looked around in awe and rising terror. Then the temperature dropped. Frost formed at the edge of the walls. The glow flickered. And the crayon lines began to move. Not literally, but perceptibly. Eyes within the drawings shifted subtly. Hands once outstretched now pointed to the wall opposite the entrance. A mural no one had noticed before. It showed a girl standing at a playground slide. Behind her, dozens of silhouettes, children, fading into white. Before her stood a creature, tall, spindly, featureless. Its arms were open. Not threatening. Not welcoming. Just waiting. And between the girl and the creature, a dog. Teeth bared. Eyes fierce. Guarding. Suddenly, one of the troopers shouted, "Sir! Look!" A crack formed at the base of the mural. From it, light poured, brilliant, golden white. And in the light, movement. Not threatening. Gentle. A figure stepped forward. Small. Childlike. Harlan's heart pounded. She wore a red scarf and a green coat. Evelyn. She looked up at them. Not with fear. Not with sadness. But peace. She reached out and placed her hand on the name Evelyn written on the wall. The crayon glowed bright blue, then dimmed. A heartbeat later, the mural's tall figure began to unravel. Its outline splintered. Its limbs broke into pieces of charcoal. Gone. And the light faded. The crack sealed. Silence returned. Back above, Mia's crayon broke in her hand. She looked down. The drawing showed Evelyn walking into a sunrise. No shadows behind her. No figures watching. Just open sky. "She's not part of the room anymore," Mia whispered. "She's free." Max let out a soft, relieved whimper. The chamber beneath the playground would later be sealed permanently. Not buried. Respected. The state declared it a historical anomaly. The news called it a miracle. But those who had seen inside knew better. It was never about ghosts. It was about memory. About the places pain clings to when it's been ignored too long. And the names that beg not to be forgotten. The drawings were moved to a secure archive. Except one. The mural. The one that showed Evelyn, the children, the dog, and the tall figure. That one faded within hours of the event. As if it had fulfilled its purpose. As if the room had let go. Jenna placed Evelyn's mitten in a memory box. Mia added her drawing. Lorraine added the letter she'd written. And Max simply lay down by the fire. And slept. For the first time in days. Without watching the door. In the days that followed, the weather in Windmere changed. The cold retreated, almost as if the storm had taken winter with it. Snow that had clung stubbornly to rooftops and shaded woods melted fast. Playgrounds thawed, streets turned to slush, and children emerged cautiously from their homes. It was as if the ground itself was sighing in relief. And in the middle of it all, the Petersons tried to resume life as usual. Tried. Because how do you go back to normal after witnessing something like that? Mia slept through the next 2 nights without interruption. No drawings. No whispers. No staring at closet doors or waking in sweat. But she still clutched Max's collar as she drifted off each night. He never left her side. Jenna and David didn't press her for more. They simply let her rest. Rachel, on the other hand, kept a journal. Not for herself, but for Evelyn. Someone has to keep her story, she told Jenna. Not just the facts. The feelings. The drawings. The colors. Every night, she sat in the living room and transcribed Mia's sketches into words. This one, she'd write, was drawn after the first snowfall. A girl in a red scarf standing under a broken swing. No mouth. Just eyes full of noise. Lorraine Holt didn't leave town. She stayed. She volunteered at the local community center, which had reopened after the thaw. She helped organize art classes for children, including Mia. One day, she brought a shoebox filled with Evelyn's old crayons. Thought they'd like to be used again, she said quietly. Mia chose a bright blue one and said this was her favorite. Lorraine just nodded. She didn't ask how Mia knew. At the now-sealed playground site, a memorial began to take shape. It wasn't official, no plaque, no mayor's speech. Just people. Quiet ones. A woman who left a small sock and a note. To my brother, who never came home from kindergarten. A man who sat on the bench and whispered a name before vanishing into the trees. And one day, a line of tiny handprints appeared on the new wooden fence. No one saw who made them. But they weren't painted. They were scorched. Just enough to raise questions. Just enough to remind the town, not everything beneath the surface was gone. The state's Historical Anomaly Task Force eventually packed up. Their final report was inconclusive. They called the chamber a subterranean nursery space possibly constructed by early 20th century settlers, though no such architecture existed in regional records. The drawings were psychosocial coping mechanisms. The spiral? A symbolic representation of generational trauma. Jenna laughed bitterly when she read it. No wonder she stayed hidden, she muttered. They were trying to explain away something that didn't fit in a box. But some boxes still mattered. One evening, David brought down the old memory bin from the attic. Inside were Mia's early baby clothes, her first shoes, her ultrasound picture. And tucked inside a plastic bag, a crayon drawing Mia had made at age 4. It had seemed random then. Now it didn't. It showed a playground covered in snow. A dog. A girl inside the slide. And in the distance, something watching. Jenna looked at it, heart thudding. She's always known, she whispered. David nodded. Or maybe she always remembered. Mia no longer spoke of the girl. But she did speak of the others. They're not all bad, she told Lorraine one day as they sorted crayons. Some got stuck. Like gum on a shoe. They couldn't leave because no one saw them. And now? Lorraine asked. They're still there. But it's different now. The cracks are light, not dark. Lorraine smiled gently. Do you feel safer? Mia shrugged. I feel seen. Max changed too. He no longer sat vigil at the door. But he still paused on walks, especially near playgrounds. And sometimes, just sometimes, he'd stop mid-step and tilt his head. As if listening. Then move on. Jenna began to think of him not just as a protector, but as a bridge. Between what is seen and what is felt. One Saturday, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a photograph of a crayon drawing taped to a mirror. A child had drawn a version of Evelyn, red scarf, green coat, standing next to a jungle gym that wasn't in Windmere. The letter read. My son drew this after the thunderstorm last week. We live 2 towns over. He says her name is Evelyn, and she smiles now. He's never met you. But he said she said thank you. Below that. Please tell your daughter she's not the only one. Word spread. Families began reaching out. Emails, letters, packages. Drawings from children across counties. All featuring the same thing, a girl with a red scarf, a golden dog, and spirals, always spirals, fading into light. The local paper finally ran a full story. The playground beneath, Windermere's quiet mystery. The article was careful, no mention of ghosts, no talk of the supernatural. But between the lines, people understood. It wasn't just about Evelyn. It was about those who were left unheard for too long. About what happens when pain is buried. And what happens when someone finally listens. At the memorial, someone had carved a phrase into the fence. It wasn't graffiti. It was artfully done, etched with care. She waited in silence. But someone finally answered. No one claimed it. But Mia smiled when she saw it. She didn't wait alone, she whispered. Not at the end. That night, for the first time since it all began, Jenna left the porch light off. No fear. No anxiety. Just quiet. Just peace. And in the dark, Max lay curled by the fire, his ears twitching softly. Mia dreamed of a swing set this time. No snow. Just summer sun. A breeze. And Evelyn. Not waving goodbye. But swinging. Weightless. Free. Spring arrived in Windermere early that year. The lake thawed by late February. Green sprigs pushed through the wet earth. Birds returned to the trees before anyone expected. It was as if nature, too, had been waiting for something to be released before it could move forward. The playground remained fenced off, though the tape had long since fallen away. Officials came and went, engineers, journalists, even folklore investigators from universities in the state. None stayed long. Each left quietly, eyes lingering on the tree line as they departed. They all sensed it. This wasn't just an archaeological mystery. This was something deeper. Something remembered. Inside the Peterson home, life took on a strange new rhythm. Mia returned to school. Her teachers noted how quiet she had become, watchful, always attentive, but also calm. Like she carried something none of them could see. Rachel began writing full-time, her journal now 3 notebooks thick with stories, memories, and the images Mia once drew. But she added her own, too, images of how the town had shifted since Evelyn. She titled the manuscript, Echoes in the Playground. One morning, David received an unexpected email. Subject line, Evelyn Holt case. The sender? A detective from another state. He'd come across the story online and had been working his own unsolved child disappearance from 2009, another girl, age 7, missing after playing near a public park. She used to draw spirals too, he wrote. We thought it was trauma. I'm not so sure anymore. Attached was a scan of the girl's drawing. A playground. A red-scarfed girl. A golden dog. Jenna stared at it for a long time. Then forwarded it to Lorraine. Lorraine had become something of a beacon. Grieving parents began contacting her directly, those who had heard about Evelyn's story and needed someone to talk to. She never offered answers. But she listened. Sometimes that was enough. She set up a foundation in Evelyn's name to provide grief counseling for families of the missing. She called it the Still Voice. Its motto: they may be silent, but they are not gone. That spring, on the first Saturday of April, the town came together for a vigil. It wasn't officially sanctioned. No permits. No speeches. Just candles. Dozens of them, placed along the fence that surrounded the broken playground. Children left drawings. Parents brought stuffed animals, shoes, old photographs. And Mia, wearing a red scarf Lorraine had knitted just for her, stood in front of the crowd and laid down a final picture. Not one of fear. Not one of darkness. Just a group of children playing beneath an open sky. Swinging. Smiling. And above them, in the clouds, the faint outline of a dog's face. Watching. Max passed away quietly 2 weeks later. He was 10 years old. Jenna found him curled up beneath the old pine tree in the backyard, where he used to lie on summer afternoons. His eyes were closed. His body peaceful. There were no signs of pain. Only rest. Mia didn't cry. She walked outside, sat beside him, and whispered, "Thank you for guarding the door." Jenna knelt beside her. "How did you know?" Mia looked up at the sky. "He told me goodbye last night." They buried Max on the hill behind the house, facing the playground. David carved a wooden marker. Max, the one who never barked. The one who saw. They planted wildflowers beside it. And every morning after, for weeks, birds landed on the stone and sang. The following month, Windermere Elementary started a new mural project with the community. The theme: What we remember. Dozens of children came forward to paint. Mia painted Evelyn, this time, not at the slide, but beside a pond. They were feeding ducks together. Mia had even included a second girl, unknown, with braids and a yellow dress. "Who's that?" Jenna asked. Mia smiled. "She's one of the ones who didn't know her name. But I think she does now." That night, Jenna found another old drawing while cleaning out a closet. One Mia had made nearly a year before Evelyn's name was ever spoken aloud. It showed a figure wrapped in spirals, trapped behind glass. A dog stood before the glass, unmoving. A girl watched from the corner of the page, holding a piece of chalk. Jenna turned the page over. Mia had scrawled one line on the back. "Some doors are opened by remembering." She placed it in the memory box beside Evelyn's mitten. As spring turned to summer, Windermere grew greener than ever before. The woods behind the playground sprouted fresh undergrowth. New families moved into town. And every now and then, someone would ask about the old caution fence and the makeshift memorial. Most locals would smile softly and say, "That's where we remembered someone we shouldn't have forgotten." One afternoon in June, Mia sat alone beneath the pine tree, sketching. Lorraine approached quietly. "What are you drawing now?" Mia showed her. It was a circle of children, holding hands. Inside the circle, a light. Not a flame. Something softer. Almost like memory made visible. Above the circle, 3 words were written carefully. "We're still here." Lorraine knelt beside her, tears in her eyes. "You are, aren't you?" Mia looked toward the hill. "There's still more. But it's quieter now." On the last page of Rachel's manuscript, she wrote, "We didn't set out to uncover anything. Not a mystery. Not a ghost. Not a tragedy. We were just walking the dog. But the dog knew. And when the dog stopped and stared at the frozen playground, the world paused with him. Not because of what he saw, but because of what he remembered." Summer in Windermere came quietly that year. Not with fanfare, not with fireworks, but with calm breezes, long daylight hours, and the soft hum of cicadas in the trees. The town moved forward, not forgetting what had happened, but folding it into its rhythm. A story passed in knowing glances, gentle silences, and the presence of something unspoken in the corners of the old playground. The fence still stood, but it no longer kept people out. It held memory in. And memory, now, was a sacred thing. Inside the Peterson home, Mia sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper in front of her. It had been weeks since she last drew. Jenna poured her a glass of lemonade. "Thinking of something?" Mia didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, "I think it's time to finish." Jenna sat across from her. "Finish what?" Mia picked up a blue crayon, the same shade Evelyn had once favored, and whispered the story she started. That afternoon, Rachel received an email from a small regional publisher. They had reviewed her manuscript, Echoes in the Playground, and wanted to move forward. She nearly cried reading the editor's note. "We don't usually publish stories like this. But something about your words felt necessary. Quiet. Haunting. Healing. Please let us honor them properly." Rachel printed the email and pinned it beside Mia's artwork wall. David, meanwhile, had organized a digital archive. Each drawing, every scanned image from the chamber, plus new submissions from children across the state, was now publicly available. There were now hundreds. Children still dreaming. Still drawing. Still remembering. But the drawings had changed. The darkness was retreating. The tall figure appeared less and less. The spirals faded. And in their place? Circles of light. Dogs. Trees. Playgrounds full of children who smiled. Lorraine Holt opened the Evelyn Holt Foundation's first physical center that August. Inside, the walls were decorated with children's art, some bright, some strange, all meaningful. In the front lobby, framed in glass, was the first original drawing Mia had ever made of Evelyn. A girl in a red scarf, standing by a slide, holding a crayon. Beneath it, "We see you." One night, as late summer crickets chirped beneath the windows, Mia brought Jenna a folded piece of paper. "It's the last one," she said. "The last what?" "The last drawing." Jenna opened it slowly. It showed Evelyn, older now. Maybe 10. Maybe 12. Not the girl who went missing, but someone who had grown in the place where memory lived. She stood not by the playground, but by a door. A glowing doorway surrounded by swirls of color. Not spirals anymore, but galaxies. And behind her, hundreds of children. All holding crayons. Some laughing. Some drawing. And one dog. Golden. Standing beside her, tail wagging. Eyes kind. Jenna touched the page. "What is this?" Mia smiled. "It's where they went. When we remembered them." "Is it heaven?" Mia shook her head. "No. It's memory. But free." That weekend, the town voted to redesign the old playground. It would no longer be sealed or hidden, but honored. The broken slide was removed and replaced with a sculpture, an arch of colored glass spirals that refracted sunlight in soft rainbows across the play area. They named the new space Evelyn's Circle. At its center stood a bronze statue, a little girl offering a crayon to a golden dog. At the dedication, Mia stood quietly beside Lorraine. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. Years passed. Windmere changed. Children grew. Parents aged. The world spun on. But every winter, when the first snow fell, a new drawing appeared on the fence. No one ever saw who placed it. Sometimes it was a single crayon sun. Other times, it was a page filled with names. But the handwriting was always small. Always careful. And always signed with a single letter. E. Mia stopped drawing when she turned 12. Not because she couldn't, but because she no longer needed to. She had remembered everything she was meant to. And now, she let the others remember for themselves. On the 15th anniversary of Evelyn's disappearance, Jenna, David, Rachel, and Mia returned to the memorial. They laid a single candle. And beneath it, a new note. Not written in fear. Not written in mourning. Just a thank you. For showing us that remembering is the beginning of healing. For proving that silence doesn't mean absence. For waiting until someone listened. Later that night, The stars were unusually clear. Mia sat on the hill beside Max's marker, now overgrown with wildflowers and ivy. She looked up. And for a moment, just a moment, she saw her. Evelyn. Older. Smiling. Walking into the sky like it was a field. Not waving goodbye. Just walking ahead. Like she was leading the way. Max's wind chime tinkled once. A breeze carried the scent of warm grass. And Mia whispered, "We see you still."